No one stood more respected in his community than Father Ivan Payne.
Father Ivan Payne betrayed the trust of his victims, of their families, and he was in a very, very special position of trust.
He lied through his teeth to every single psychiatrist, psychotherapist, psychologist.
A master of deception, he terrorised children for 3 decades. The true scale of his crimes remains unknown.
We know 15 boys were abused in parishes by Ivan Payne. My guess is you could multiply that figure by 3, 4, who knows.
Normally when he was older.
He becomes a loner, often sad. He appears vulnerable. Later, sad, lonely, vulnerable boys will get special attention from Father Ivan Payne.
The children there would be very ill.
Nobody suspects Father Payne.
People have this notion that sex offenders are typically the dirty old men in the Mack that you could probably recognise just by the way they look. To be a successful sex offender, you have to be able to attract people to you. So Ivan Payne is not untypical of sex offenders in that he was very energetic, very bright, very attractive, and so it would never have crossed the minds of anybody that this was a person who was a danger to children.
It is Payne's winning personality that allows key people in both the hospital and the church to trust him utterly.
The particular thing about Ivan was his brilliance of manipulation. That was the key aspect.
But Ivan Payne is still held in high regard by his superiors and nothing is done. He remains on the ward.
In Ireland at that time, and indeed right up to the turn of the century, we have multiple instances of where children try to tell.
That get close to children. It isn't strangers with the Macks that get close to children. People who get close to children are respectable, fit into the community, are liked, and who are good at talking to children and parents.
And even when there are dark whispers, the church needs more.
Rumours are not evidence, so although there seems to be some evidence that
Slim, nobody in authority suspects him.
Because of the high status the priest.
Him as the parish priest would have been a hero and a huge figure.
Ivan Payne, priest and paedophile, has trapped his victims in a secret world of shame and abuse, and he seems beyond the reach of the police, the church, of anyone, even after the church, again hearing no more than whispers, insist on a psychological test.
without actually dealing with the core problem that was Father Payne himself.
It had been a period of months since news of Ivan Payne's abuses had reached Archbishop's house in Dublin, but Father Payne is still on the streets.
I would still see Ivan Payne around the place, and I asked to see Ken Duggan a couple of weeks later, and he told me that was Ivan Payne. I said to one of my pub friends, I want you to drive me out to Sutton. I hadn't seen the sort of person he had known was not somebody who would be building up drinking debts in a pub, but he gave me a cheque anyway.
Amazingly, despite numerous attacks on Andrew alone and many more in the children's hospital, Payne has expertly kept himself from being prosecuted by police or punished by the church. His victims have either been too young or too embarrassed to go public. It means the abusive priest can remain up to his old tricks. It had been nearly 30 years since his ordination. Payne has abused dozens in a children's hospital, more in his own parish and at a charity home for youngsters. Can Father Payne still cover up his sins?
Investigate this man. He was a pillar of society.
Other victims decide to go to the authorities. 2 former altar boys from the parish of Sutton.
I suppose that awareness gave some of the victims the confidence to bring it forward to a different arena. When those 2 altar boys went to the Gardaí, that was the beginning of a full criminal investigation, at the beginning really of the church's cooperation with the civil authorities.
Still, the priest refuses to confess his sins.
There was a tendency of the church and of the abusers themselves to dismiss their conduct as simply blurring the lines between a friendship.
Dismissive and defiant, Father Payne tries to evade the law, but the case was mounting against him. Anthony and Imiela lay in wait, often in broad daylight, to sadistically beat, then rape women, young and old.
We had the attack in Red Hill, the attack in Epsom, the attack in Woking, and then we later found out that there had been a much earlier offence in Thames Valley.
As well as the horror of the rape, Anthony and Imelia's victims were subjected to extreme violence.
Punching victims, headlocking victims.
All the while, Imiela continued a normal life, fooling those around him into believing he was simply a loving husband and father.
Just wasn't my dad as far as I'm concerned.
The parents come and go to collect their children. Imiela brazenly lies in wait. A small girl is putting up posters asking for information about a missing cat. She waits for a lift home. A few feet from her, Imiela sees a copse of trees. He pounces.
This young girl was then dragged into undergrowth, stripped and raped and told to count to 500 when he went to give him some time to make his escape.
Away sights. It's part of his work. For victim number 3, he targets a woman jogging about 10 minutes from a junction of the motorway.
The victim in this case was a 30-year-old woman.
In that incident, it was during the day, it was summer, and an adult lady was out running.
This woman was approached, surprised. She was punched in the face immediately, put into a headlock and dragged away and eventually raped.
Imiela takes advantage of the motorway system to quickly exit the scene. By striking in the middle of the day, he was ensuring his getaway would not be hindered by too much traffic. And, chillingly, it also meant that he could attack again on the same day. Imiela was to make the ordeal for his next victim particularly appalling, with a cruel twist of the rapist's arsenal of torture. It's what he does every time.
Punching victims, headlocking victims, the kinds of things that most men perhaps wouldn't dream of doing to a woman or any of us to a child.
Another distinctive macabre element emerges.
He talked to his victims. He covered their faces.
He spent most of the time.
Despite her complaints to the police, no further action is taken. So Imiela, the rapist, is soon back on the prowl. She turns to answer a request to get into a man's car. She runs. Imiela grabs her and throws her in the back of the vehicle. She is to suffer a horrifying ordeal.
He knew that the police knew who he was, and this little girl was taken at knife point into a car and driven around for some 5 hours. And assaulted constantly over that time. In fact, he is said to have stopped on 10 occasions during this 5 hours to assault her. He did attempt to rape her, but
was in search of a